I want to talk about IU Wrestling, who just took on Illinois on the road against Champaign. I guess I shouldn't say that they just took on Illinois. That was about 6 days ago that contest took place in Champaign against the Illinois Fighting Illini. That was last Friday night at 10 p.m., a late one. It was a part of the Big Ten Network triple header. Of course, ended up with the short end of the stick being the last match to take place. Indiana will go to take on Wisconsin this Saturday, a meet that I'm very excited to witness. But until then, we have this Illinois matchup to discuss. I have some overall thoughts, and then I have 5 individual matches that I want to sort of highlight at this point after seeing sort of what went down in those matchups last weekend. Overall, this is certainly, to me, more of a statement about Illinois emerging at the top of the Big Ten this season than it is about Indiana sort of faltering. Illinois ultimately won 27-7. Illinois, I believe, ranked number 10 in the country. At least they were at the time in which this match took place. Indiana way down at number 24, but still ranked, still certainly a formidable opponent for the Fighting Illini, even in Champaign. And again, this was a statement for Illinois. This to me felt like a team that was going to round into form. It felt like a team that was going to improve a great deal over the course of the season, and it seems as if that is exactly what has happened. They win 27-7. They win 8 out of 10 individual matches. Every ranked Illinois wrestler that stepped onto the mats on Friday night won. That included 2 ranked upsets over Indiana, in which 2, ranked Illinois wrestlers beat wrestlers that were ranked higher than them, namely Jacob Moran and Sam Goen were the 2 Hoosiers that fell in that fashion. And those are the 2 matchups that I want to talk about first. Again, Illinois ultimately dominates. They win 8 out of 10. There's 3 categories of individual matchups that I want to talk about. I want to talk about the 2 upsets. I want to talk about the 2 wins that Indiana was able to put together. And then there's one sort of wild card match at the end that I want to talk about that stuck out to me. Kind of an outstanding performance, I suppose you could call it. But as far as notable matchups go in terms of upsets, there's obviously just 2, one of which began the entire meet. It was at 125 pounds. Number 11, Jacob Moran, scored 3 points, and number 20, Spencer Moore, scored 6 after sudden victory concluded with the Spencer Moore decisive takedown. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't watch this match live. The broadcast hadn't switched from Nebraska-Penn State to Indiana-Illinois. I was also watching Nebraska-Penn State, and again, that one ran a little bit long, and then Big Ten Network hadn't switched to Indiana-Illinois quite yet. It was also on the Fox Sports app, I believe, and I was trying to download the Fox Sports app, and then by the time I could actually figure it out and get it up, the matchup had switched to Big Ten Network and switched to Indiana, Illinois. So by the time the broadcast got to Champaign, we were halfway through the matchup at 1:33. So I didn't watch this one live, but obviously went back and witnessed it. Moran scores first, and it was that early takedown for Moran that sort of appeared to be that early energy, that early success, that early example that Moran was able to set for the rest of the lightweights in many of the other duels. Put together a lot of content last week after the matchup against Michigan State about Moran and about how his success at 125 is critical to the rest of the lightweight portion of the roster and just important to the roster as a whole. To start off dual meets with Moran succeeding and often winning not only puts the Hoosiers ahead on the scoreboard, but also puts the Hoosiers ahead in terms of energy, intensity, and just the exemplary wrestling that Moran puts together right away is a big, big deal for the Hoosiers. And it looks like we were going to see that again. Again, he's against a ranked opponent, a tough opponent, but one that is ranked lower than him. Moran scores first, but then Spencer Moore, number 20 Spencer Moore for Illinois, at least at the time, number 20 Spencer Moore, he forces overtime, we're into sudden victory, and then just like that, he has a takedown, a very nice takedown in sudden victory time, leading to Illinois sort of stunning the Hoosiers and winning the first bout at 125. That was a big one for Indiana. Again, Illinois higher ranks than Indiana as a team, so certainly it would help if Indiana would be able to win the matches in which they are likely to win because they have the higher ranked wrestler. That didn't happen at 125. Come to find out, that wouldn't be the first time that had occurred where there's an Illinois upset. But Moran loses right away, and that, again, that's a big, big deal because that early success for Indiana, not quite there in the same way, and obviously they're down on the scoreboard right away. Not something you typically see. They're down on the scoreboard, and then at 133, Illinois has the number 1 wrestler in the country in that weight class, being Lucas Bird. It's a big deal, right? So that loss at 125 honestly kind of doomed the Hoosiers to a loss across the board because you're kind of guaranteed to couple that with a loss against number 1 Lucas Bird, and now you're down probably with bonus points They weren't down with bonus points, but regardless, you're down by 2 matches right away, and it's just a lot to come back from. So to win early with Jacob Moran was going to be huge for the Hoosiers, and it didn't happen. It was an upset for Spencer Moore. Of course, credit to him for the Fighting Illini for making that happen. But that, again, was a huge, huge deal for Indiana. The other upset occurred much later. By that time, the meet was pretty much wrapped up. It's at 184. Number 14, Sam Goen, who has been awesome recently. He scored 3 points. Number 20, Chris Moore, another number 20 wrestler for Illinois, scored 5 points. That's a regular decision victory for the Fighting Illini. The first period contained a lot of time on the feet. That happens a lot when you have 2 wrestlers that are ranked, 2 wrestlers that are ranked very closely to one another. Goen scores a takedown, though. Again, he scores first, just like Moran. It ends up being 3-2 at the end of 2 periods, right? Because you see Moore escape in the first period from Goen's takedown. Goen wasn't able to ride him out, and then he escapes early in the second after starting on bottom. So it's 3-2, and Chris Moore decides to go neutral in the third period against Goen. Sort of foregoes the opportunity to, or rather, prevents the opportunity for any escape point to be scored in the third period. The 2 start from neutral. Moore makes that decision because he wants to go for the winning takedown. Even if he escapes, going to need a takedown anyway. So obviously going for the winning takedown, and he does succeed. He finds that takedown late in the third period, and a little bit more scoring, but that's it pretty much. Chris Moore went neutral and struck gold with what he was looking for, able to upset Sam Goen. So it's 2 very similar archetypes of upsets, perhaps, where the higher-ranked wrestler, Moran and Goen, they both started out strong. They both scored first. And then it just stays close, and they can't pull away, and these Illinois wrestlers, hang around, they stick around, obviously ranked, obviously there's a lot of quality to them, and then whether it's sudden victory or whether it's late in the third period, they pop that late takedown starting from neutral and ultimately swing the result in their favor, and the match sort of ends out of nowhere, and you kind of stand bewildered thinking, wow, I can't believe that's over. I can't believe the Hoosier lost in that situation. So that happened to Sam Goen, and that happened to Jacob Moran. Jacob Moran obviously right away, a very tough loss for the Hoosiers. Goen a little bit later on, also a very tough loss. I don't remember exactly if that was the matchup that ended the duel, if that indicated that Illinois had the win or not. But regardless, Indiana in a tough spot after both of those upsets. 2 of their highest-ranked wrestlers across the board, 2 of their very best wrestlers on the roster, and they both lost to Illinois. Again, that just plays into the fact that this was a statement, emergent victory for Illinois. They beat a team ranked lower than them, not a huge deal, but the way they did it was a big, big deal for Illinois. And again, they're emerging onto the scene. They're not Penn State, but they can compete with teams like Penn State and Ohio State. And obviously they have a defending national champion in Lucas Byrd, may very well have a national champion again at 133 in Lucas Byrd, although that's a very interesting weight class for a variety of reasons. So a great win for Illinois. Great individual wins from Chris Moore and Spencer Moore for Illinois. And they move on with 2 upset victories. Now, Indiana, they had 2 wins as well, and this is just 2 wins that they were able to pick up. At 141, number 24 Henry Porter beat Cole Brower by major decision. This is an interesting one because we could have been looking at a much more interesting matchup for Illinois. Number 23, Daniel Pacino, was out with an injury, so Porter pretty much had an easier win, kind of had the easy way out against Brower. He went for the major decision. This was kind of the big story for Indiana, at least in terms of positive stories in that first half of the meet, where Porter and Escobedo, head coach Angel Escobedo, they're really pushing to try to get that major decision. Escobedo and that coaching staff really pushing for the major decision, really pushing for the bonus points. It obviously was huge to get the Hoosiers back in the match at that time, and Porter succeeded. A late takedown. He's able to clutch the major decision points. It's 12-3. It's a 9-point victory. Very well could have been a regular decision, but really spurred some momentum and displayed some fight for the Hoosiers. With that major decision win, Porter was able to get it there late in the final minutes. And then at 197, you have Gabe Sollers, number 15 for Indiana, versus Dylan Connell. Sollers wins 6-0, regular decision. It's similar to 184 with Sam Goen. There's a relatively uneventful first period, except this time it's Sollers that's scoring and really really wrestling conservatively. He has an escape, he has a takedown, and then he rides out Connell, and Connell's not able to initiate any offense basically the rest of the way, and that's an opportunity for Sollers to, of course, score and win. So it's 6-0. It's just a regular decision, a clean regular decision victory, but efficient, right? You escape, you take him down, and then you ride him out for the rest of the period, and that's all there is to it. And that's effectively what Sollers was able to do for the majority of that match at 197. So those are the two wins. Porter and Sahlers, two ranked wrestlers, pick up wins for Indiana. We had the two upsets. Moran falls, Goen falls. That's a huge deal, right? Those are perhaps the two best wrestlers on this Indiana roster across the board this season. If someone's going to win a national championship for Indiana, it's probably one of those two this season. Those two wins for Illinois absolutely critical to their ultimate 27-7 victory over Indiana across the board. One last matchup I want to talk about, though, is at 133. Number 1, Lucas Byrd scored 7 points, and Jackson Bloom scored 1 point, and that's a freshman for Indiana. And he's someone that hasn't necessarily been at the forefront, at the very tip-top of the rotation for Indiana throughout the season at 133. We've seen Blaine Frazier, we've seen Logan Frazier. This time we saw Jackson Bloom, and the young kid really fought, and he wrestled very, very well. Again, the broadcast cut to Big Ten Network. It cut to Champaign with Byrd up 4-0 in the middle of this one. He puts together another takedown. It's 7-0. And then in that third period, Bloom escaped and defended well. And in period 3, basically was able to survive and prevent bonus points from being scored by number 1 Lucas Byrd. That is a huge deal. Number 1 Lucas Byrd, the defending national champion, one of the best pound-for-pound wrestlers in the NCAA right now, and Jackson Bloom's a freshman, and he steps in and is able to survive 7-1, avoids any bonus points from being scored by by Lucas Byrd. That's a huge deal. A respectable performance for the freshman, Jackson Bloom. I really appreciated that early on. Again, it was kind of an auto loss. There's an understanding that Lucas Byrd is very, 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 very likely to beat Jackson Bloom on a given day. Obviously did this time, but to not score bonus points there, and that paired with what soon after was the Henry Porter win for Indiana, that really made it feel like Indiana was in this, right? Despite the fact that Moran lost right away, it felt like Indiana was in it because they prevented bonus points from being scored by Byrd and then scored bonus points themselves with Porter. A great sequence for the Hoosiers. And there was, a timeout in between, because the broadcast cuts between 133 and 141. So there's a break in between, but across the break, a huge sequence for Indiana, a big deal at 133 and 141. So I wanted to shout out Jackson Bloom because, again, that was a great bout for him against number 1 Lucas Byrd, about as good as you can ask for in that situation. Porter with a nice win. He chases bonus points and achieves them. Sahlers with a nice, efficient, conservative win at 197 late in the duel, even after it was already wrapped up. And then unfortunately for the Hoosiers, you have Sam Goen, number 14, going down against Chris Moore, and then number 11, Jacob Moran, falling to number 20, Spencer Moore, both with those late takedowns. It's a totally different matchup if those late takedowns don't occur, but those late takedowns did occur, and that leads us to the situation where Indiana obviously loses 27-7 on the road. So a tough outing for Indiana, but again, Indiana wrestled well. Bloom wrestled well. Even those two upset losses with Moran and Goen, I feel like they wrestled very well. There's a parallel universe where they win both of those, and we're having a completely different conversation about how this match sort of shook out, and potentially a much different conversation down the stretch, especially if Illinois was able were not quite able to pull away late. But regardless, a tough one for Indiana. They wrestled well. It's way more about Illinois being awesome than it is about Indiana being lackluster in this situation. 100%. That's my opinion and my takeaway. Illinois is awesome. They're top 10 for a reason. I would have to look at the rest of their schedule for the rest of their matchups, but certainly there's some exciting stuff going on for Illinois the rest of the way. We'll have to monitor Lucas Byrd and his chase for another national championship. There are plenty of other wrestlers that are likely to make deep runs in those NCAA tournament championships. The Big Ten championships as well. That tournament's going to be very, very fascinating across the board, and Illinois, again, very much in contention. Last year, you had Penn State win the national championship, and Nebraska was second. Maybe it's the same this year. Maybe it's Iowa. Maybe it's someone else, but it could totally be Illinois. And Illinois is a team just like that I think could be very much in play at the top of the Big Ten and at the top of the NCAA tournament, as they have been throughout, as they've proven to be capable of doing throughout this season. So again, 2 upset losses, 2 tough ones, 2 nice wins, and a standout performance and a loss that I really appreciated from a freshman in Jackson Bloom. Not a bad outing for Indiana, a great outing for Illinois. That's the ultimate takeaway from those two teams' wrestling duel on Friday night. Now, Indiana will go to Madison, Wisconsin, and will take on the Badgers, number 17 Wisconsin at last check, this Saturday. I believe that starts at 2 p.m., so that will be fascinating and interesting. I'm going to watch it with my guy Noah Bedoris, who's come on this show before, and we'll talk a lot about wrestling obviously during that time. And very fascinating. That one will be between Indiana and Wisconsin. And then we prepare for Indiana to return home to take on Nebraska not too far from now. That's in about a week. So very exciting stuff coming for Indiana. Plenty more opportunities. Wisconsin's a team that they have good wrestlers. Wisconsin and Illinois are very similar, right? They're ranked in a similar area, right? In terms of the Big Ten standings, they're in a similar area. Illinois has really impressed me throughout the season, and I felt great about Illinois. I don't feel quite as good about Wisconsin, and I think if there's a ranked Big Ten team that's going to lose to another Big Ten team, I think Wisconsin might be the pick. Indiana very well could be the pick in that situation too, but Wisconsin versus Indiana could be very interesting, and I'm looking forward to that matchup this weekend because I think Indiana's going to be able to put together a little bit more fight than many would expect, especially on with a great deal of rest, right? That would be about 8 days of rest, whereas sometimes there's only 2 days of rest between matchups. So looking forward to that. Very interested in what's going to happen between Indiana and Wisconsin this weekend, and that will be what's left to watch play out. We'll hopefully have a podcast some point next week to talk about that duel. Either way, Indiana 7, Illinois 27. Illinois is awesome. Indiana still very, very good. That's what I have to say about Indiana wrestling this week.